Recorded live at Talks and Tasting Studios, it's the Clerical Errors Podcast, the podcast that shows you what's behind the collar. Let's go.
From the Talks and Tasting Studios, this is the Clerical Errors Podcast, podcast that shows you what's behind the collar. And this is Bollhagen, just me. That's all you got, just me. Busy week, lots of things going on, lots of plates spinning, and yet here I am doing a show. And I want to begin with something interesting. Raise your hand if you've ever lived in a river town. One thing I've noticed about river towns is they can be very religious, but you also have a lot of people who kind of just wake up in the morning deciding, I'm going to be a pastor and I'm going to start a church. And what tends to happen is, well, they read the Bible and without any context, really, not with a lot of understanding. And they say, okay, this is what it means. And they tend to be very different because it's just the one man's interpretation of what is going on in the Bible. The reason why I'm using that analogy is, one, because I am a pastor and we are really good at making bad analogies. The second is we have Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Convention starting in a week. And I thought I would, for the viewer, take a look at some of the resolutions being proposed so give an idea of what kind of is going on in Synod. Oftentimes you'll hear very strong opinions from people who really plugged into what's going on in our beloved church body. And they know the history, what's behind it, everything that's going on, and check their blogs a lot. They still have blogs, I think so, or the Reddit machine, or whatever they use, TikTok. And kind of have a deep understanding of everything that's going on. Why is this resolution there? Kind of history, who said what, who did what, where this is all coming, and why we are addressing some of these things. And I am like one of those schismatic Rivertown pastors, not when it comes to the Word of God, but I'm not very plugged in, if I'm going to be honest. I don't spend a lot of time checking blogs, calling friends. Usually any kind of information I get, I ask the vicar, well, what's going on? And they know way more about, even though they're new to church polity and that kind of thing, they generally know way more than I do because, I don't know, I'm so busy being a pastor sometimes that I guess I'm a little uninformed with some of those things, which then gives me an interesting point of view. I'm going to take a look at some of the proposed resolution that I have here from Today's Business, which you can find at the lcms.org website, and kind of give you an overview, maybe an interesting take, maybe not try and guess what's going on, but a fresh eyes from someone who really doesn't know what's going on with some of these. Now, I've heard, to be honest, I have heard about some of these things, but I really don't know everything that's going on. And a lot of times it just kind of happens and you gotta know to know. And a lot of interesting discussions that may happen behind the scenes that everyone kind of knows, except for me, if that makes any sense. And so maybe if you're a listener and you want to be our correspondent, please let us know. You can get a hold of us at, well, you know how to get a hold of us. You don't need, I may use that for vicar to feel helpful sometimes so you can actually say those, but you know how to get a hold of us, feedback at clericalerrors.org, right? You can find us. You can find us on the X, the Twitter. You could do that. Listener, I believe in you because you are in the know when it comes to this podcast. So there are a few ones that I would like to maybe speak on to kind of give you a heads up. I am not going to go through, I think there's probably over 100 of them. That would make a long podcast. And that's not my thing, right? But I would like to maybe speak of on some of these. So, not all of them, but obviously, but some of them, just maybe I don't know how much time I have. I'm just going to talk about some until I'm done. Does that sound cool to all you? Nice. So the first one I want to talk about is Proposed Resolution 6-04 to support residential Master of Divinity and alternate route pastoral formation for the sake of the flock. That's a lot of words. So let's break that down in the title. That really helps me understand it since we're kind of going through this together for the first time. So to support residential Master of Divinity, so that's the pastor degree, right? Your pastor, most of them have a Master of Divinity unless they went to an alternate route or a non-degree program. Residential Master of Divinity route. So in other words, they want to support the idea that pastors should actually physically go to the seminary, and that should remain kind of the gold standard, if you will, of the formation of pastors through the MDiv program. Capiche? All right, so this is where the dummy comes in, because I guess this would be LCMS convention for dummies by dummy. I really don't know, like, what's all behind this. I've heard maybe that there's, I don't know. There's some other places trying to train pastors not in there, or if it's an idea that we don't want it simply to be on Zoom. And it explains, I think, ultimately, as I look through this, that and I know this, the seminary preparation and formation of a pastor is not just the coursework. And we all know that if it's through a computer screen, it's really easy to fake certain things, right? And to be a pastor and to be prepared as a pastor, it's not just knowing the information. It is a skill-based job as well. Not a job, but a calling. And so there's lots of things that this suggests that are a big part of that. One is chapel. Now, if you're going to include daily chapel in this, it's interesting. If that's the case, then shouldn't chapel be, I don't know, be something about actually being in chapel? Novel idea. Face-to-face relationships with professors and fellow students, intensive study of scripture, and there's really an enculturation that goes on, really, that helps you. Now, here, and I can, from my personal experience, I was active at the seminary, but I really was not as active as a lot of my classmates because, a lot of the sitting down and just having all these conversations, because I was really busy. I was working about 30 hours a week at the grocery store to support my growing family. So the part of that is, you can slide by with just going to class and just doing what you need to do without having all of those things. So a lot of those things really are up to the student itself. And I don't know how, if this is a gold standard, and this is what you desire, how you can then make those kind of force them upon, because that's not always the way it can work. You could just I've had vicars before where I mentioned the vicar, oh yeah, I guess he did there. Like, we never see him. He seems to disappear. So that's one thing I think really is the important part of this, is they want in this resolution to have this as a standard. Now, a lot of people will say, well, one point to the cost, right? And if you really think why I think this is important is because why do we have a synod? Ultimately, we have a synod is so that we can have faithful pastors in pulpits. Before anything else, that is why we have a synod. We don't have a synod for programs. We don't have a synod to have a great marketing team. We don't have a synod to raise money and all those things that we think of, to have cool logos. Before anything else, why do we have a synod? Because the church needs faithful pastors, well-trained, And a church can call a pastor knowing that they have been well trained and certified and ready to do the work in the faithful manner, according to the Bible and Lutheran confessions, that they can do. And so, with that in mind, this is why it's important. Now, as I begin to ramble, ultimately, I'm going to put it in my Convention for Dummies dummy take. Part of it is we don't want, I guess you could say, we don't want to take the river town pastor example where maybe, where they're in a small situation, maybe with one person kind of leading them and guiding them. It can have kind of a skewed view sometimes without having a full, the full understanding of what's going on. But ultimately, I could see how a pastor could be catfish the process in a way. It's hard to hide who you are through 4 years of seminary training, 3 years at the seminary and 1 year on vicarage. No, it obviously can be done. But I think part of this idea is we want to know who they are. They've got to be able to interact on many different levels through the seminary training process. And so this, I'm not sure, I'm kind of, looking at this together with you in Resolution 6-4. But I do think, we generally gravitate towards what's easier. And those, who maybe don't like our seminaries, maybe want a desire to train pastors with a different bent than what our seminaries have. And so, but first and foremost, this is ultimately to reject online MDiv education, that it's kind of insufficient. Now, it's not, I don't think it's saying all forms of online education necessarily does this talk about. But ultimately, this shows a desire that, first and foremost, pastors come from a 4-year residential training to become pastors. And one thing that can be said, too, that I don't think you can really place this in this resolution, but if the idea is financial, I think we need to remember that as a synod, as a church body, what is at the heart of what we do? Putting faithful pastors into pulpits and at altars. And yes, that is costly, and it's costly to a man, to his family. I know that very well, and sometimes relocation can seem very difficult. But that's part of it. I mean, pastors relocate. Now, I'm a bad example as I've been here for 24 years. But at the same time, part of being a pastor is to go, to be sent, to move. And it's not always easy, and it's not always convenient, and it never is. And so I think with those issues, I think that's something to remember. And you want someone going into the ministry that is fully dedicated to it. And that's one way that you could show that there's dedication. But I understand, too, what people will say is, well, we need to address a shortage of pastors. Yes, we do. But the goal, the shortage of pastors, the answer is not watering down. So that's kind of my thoughts as my dummies guide to the convention. That is 6-4. All right, I had to take a quick break and just kind of do a quick read of 6-05 to reaffirm the synod's process for training and certification for pastors. Now, this is actually one thing I like about it is it doesn't try to address it simply with broad information, which is something we can tend to do sometimes where I don't even know what it's addressing. And I hear, well, this is important because it's of what could happen, when they're actually addressing situations that you don't even, half the people don't know what it is. So one thing I like about 6-05 is it is very clear in what it explains here. And it addresses by name the Institute of Lutheran Theology, known as the Center for Missional and Pastoral Leadership. I've been to a few conventions. Get your popcorn ready. This is going to be a big one. This is, I think, the one that everyone... Now, I'm a dummy, remember? And this is the Dummies Guide. But this was going to take a while to get through. One, because it's long. Two, it addresses a program that it says here, a group of former Concordia Seminary faculty announced that they will be operating an accredited online-only MDiv program. And that is the issue here. It seems like a go-around. So if you're not really don't know, there's a colloquy program that we have where, let's say I was a pastor in a Wisconsin synod, and I want to become a pastor in the Missouri synod. There is a colloquy. Okay, you've been trained, but there's a program by which then you can be certified into the LCMS as a pastor. And so this seems to indicate that, well, we want to have this online degree program where we can give an accredited degree, and then you could just colloquize into it like everyone else does who does colloquy. And it seems to be, in a way, an end around to the current process. So this brings a few things to mind as a dummy here. Well, one is, what's wrong with our two seminaries? What is it that, from a theological point of view, that they believe our two seminaries are lacking in that need this? And you could say, well, maybe it's not. It's maybe something about feasibility or a different kind of leadership. I can tell you that whenever about 50% of the pastors that you can try this with your own pastor sometime. Just ask your pastor, what do you think about the word leadership? just see that'll kind of give you a clue of how they might feel about this resolution. So, and so it's publicly known because it mentions a podcast. Shout out to podcasts made in a resolution. That's kind of on my bucket list for the Clerical Errors podcast, to make it in some sort of a synod resolution. We'll see. But, and so the resolves are that the synod and convention reaffirm the routes to the ministry created by the synod as the only routes to certification, ordination, and service as ordained ministers. Further resolve that synod and convention specifically affirm these procedures, vesting certification with the seminary faculties, vesting placement with the COP, the Council of Presidents, and barring LCMS laymen and commission ministers who complete a program of learning to ordination or its equivalent at a non-LCMS seminary from being eligible for colloquy on that basis. And I suppose there's a bit of honesty, right? It's one thing to use a colloquy because you see, someone who would have gone to the seminary if they had repented earlier. But this is using as not someone who say, I was a pastor for 5 years at this church body, I want to become a Missouri Synod pastor. This is going around that. Someone already in the Missouri Synod, and then I want to be colloquized into it. And this recognizes that's not the way to do this. And so the reason why I say there's fireworks is because, one, it names a group. And it names a group of former seminary professors which then would give credence to the idea, well, they know what they're doing, right? But that's the thing. Like, if there is an issue at our seminaries that you're trying to address, well, then let's address it at the seminary level. And one reason why I believe that 2 seminaries is a good thing for our church body in St. Louis and Fort Wayne is each seminary keeps each other honest, a little competition, right? And it gives you an option. And so we have, when we think of what does a synod do, why do we have a synod? Faithful pastors into pulpits and altars. And part of the issue, I think, with this is what tends to happen with resolutions is well, we want to be able to start one for us. No, you can't do that. That's not how we do things in the synod. And but then they'll say, but if it was something that they actually agreed with, well, that would be okay. That's kind of what happens. But this seeks ultimately to remain the 2 main routes is the St. Louis Seminary and the Fort Wayne Seminary, without kind of using a loophole with the colloquy program as a way of doing this. I could speak more about this, but I'm not going to. I'm a dummy. Remember, this is your Dummies Guide. We dummies are gathering together to try and figure these things out together. And actually, I do think 6-06, the next one, more fireworks. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to get through these 3 in a week. So interesting. I think you could watch online if you're interested. Get your popcorn ready, like I said. So this is to 6-06 to affirm, support established parameters of specific ministry pastor program. Hey, guess what this one's about? Took a quick time to read it. So it's good. This is one of those where it takes a lot of explaining. So we do have this SMP, Specific Ministry Pastor Program, which was originally designed for a limited and a contextual pathway, rather that's different than the Master of Divinity program. And it was really bent to address other issues that we were doing with the pastoral program and how to get pastors into pulpits. But this is just looking at the SMP program, the Specific Ministry Program, to see if make sure it's actually being used according to how it was intended, or is it another loophole? It's another way to kind of get around certain things in pastoral preparation. So I don't want to get too much into this because there's other ones I want to talk about, but I think those 3 are going to create fireworks. So keep our church in your prayers, for sure. And those who are representing you, and let them know. There's still time to let them know. Well, looking at took a brief pause, looking at the workbook as we walk through this together as a synod, walking together as we go arm in arm, Dummies edition. The other ones that I think will have fireworks is there are several on the university education system and what is going on, how to deal with clarifying certain protocols and getting faculty. And I don't want to really get into the specifics because I want people to listen to my podcast. But I just want to say that if you kind of knew these things were going to happen, because, over the years, when we think of, well, what did we do best as a synod? Why do you have a synod, right? And our Concordia colleges, before they were universities, really at one point had a very clear mission. Why are we here? To train pastors and teachers for our churches and our schools. And what is the smallest percentage of majors? Yes, it's good to have all sorts of different vocations in life. But what happens is, one, the main mission of the church and why you have them gets lost. And it becomes a self-preservation thing. We have bigger faculties. We're teaching to be nurses, teaching to be all sorts of different occupations that really some serve the church and some, quite frankly, you could probably get a better degree in that field somewhere else. And also with that, once you do bring then all these different majors and all these different programs, then you have to find professors to teach them, and you have to find Lutherans who desire to teach this at one of our universities so that we're not leading anyone astray. And then you have what happens next is, let's say you have a great nursing program and you have a majority of your then students where they're not because you're Lutheran, but because you have a great program. And then what happens? Well, then you compete with others. And then you see, we have someone here, not because we're Lutheran, because we gave them $2,000 a year to play football. And I wonder sometimes, imagine if we recruited church workers as we did athletes in our university system. Think about that for a moment. Anyways, I digress. Because of that, then, and we know what happens on college campuses. There's always a bent, a lean. Then it just kind of grows out of control. When you have the majority of the students who aren't there because it's Lutheran, and then those, you have students then making up a whole host of a student body where Lutheran teaching, Lutheran doctrine is less in importance. And what happens? What happens when you lose your purpose? Well, now we see. And I suppose it's harder and harder to focus on training pastors and training Lutheran school teachers, which is amazing because do you know how hard it is to find a Lutheran school teacher and call one? Okay. All right. It's very difficult. So why do we have all these universities that aren't doing that very well, or at least trying? But we have so many things that we're trying to do that we lose a focus. And then who oversees this? How do we get professors? How does this all hold together? What rights do these universities have to kind of do their own thing? And what oversight does the Synod have? That is kind of this growing issue that at some point it was going to come to roost, I think. And so this is another get your popcorn ready type of a situation. I kind of, I wasn't really worried about the convention until I sat down and turned on my microphone. This is going to be something, and hopefully the wisdom of God's word prevails in all of these situations, and brotherly love in all of these situations. But this is going to be very difficult, especially, we've closed some recently. And if you want to talk about throwing fuel to the fire, when that's freshly on people's minds, everyone wants to place blame. Everyone wants to say, well, this is what happened and this is why, this is, but ultimately, what is our mission as a church body? What are we to do? And what should our focus be? And that's kind of what I have to say, because I don't really want to get to the specifics about these, because I really don't know. I haven't read these with a clear enough eye to get to the bottom of all of these. And I'm not in the loop, like I said before. But I think that's at the heart of all these things. Moving on. So, another one that I have a little interested in. I mean, would it be a convention at the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod? Would we actually count or be official if we didn't have one on closed communion? I don't think that there would be. So this is our closed communion resolution. And one thing I will say is it's never used, but it is helpful for people to know that just because some don't follow it, and pastors go into situations where it's not followed, that you have something where it's stated, no, this is what we hold to. And so, and it kind of addresses, this is 5-05. So some things that this addresses is kind of the silly thing. I think it's silly. Is it close communion or closed communion? I mean, you can argue about those things. I mean, it's that whole thing is silly, right? Because you're trying to say the same thing but in a different way. Let's just stop. Let's just use closed, okay? The other thing is, I think it addresses is, now, a lot of times you have a communion statement or card where it walks you through, okay, do you believe you receive the body and blood of Christ? Kind of leading up questions where, in a sense, oh yeah, that sounds agreeable. And it really isn't then closed communion. And it is good to have a resolution on closed communion. I kind of joked about it, but it's really good for a pastor and congregations to have the support and say, no, like, if we are Missouri Synod, and that is what we confess in walking together, to make sure people know this isn't just your pastor being a jerk about things. He's trying to be faithful to God's word and trying to walk together with our synod. And so the other thing I think this offers is, there are other things where it talks about pastoral discretion. And I think this is trying to say, you use that pastoral discretion way too much. Because your discretion could be, I don't want to deal with this right now. So that is 5-5. And I think anytime you have a further clarification on closed communion, a further reiteration of that, the better. We just need to follow it. One of the more interesting ones that I believe is 5-11. Look at my time. This is all I have time to go through. If you want me to talk about more, you want more dummy ideas about these, please let me know. Oh, so this one I think it's interesting because I like the ones where you're actually dealing with theology and not just structure and governance and all these things. I like the ones that talk about, like, how does our theology get practiced? And this is one of them. 5-11, to reaffirm sanctity of human life regarding practice of in vitro fertilization. And now, more fireworks, because I don't know if this has always been understood, explained. The fact that, you're creating in vitro fertilization, you create a lot of embryos, and there are lots of embryos still frozen. I would say millions. If we believe that human life begins at conception, that's not cool. And in fact, you could even adopt them. You can adopt a frozen embryo. So, with the intent of carrying a child, not just I'm going to adopt an embryo and take it out to the park or something. No, no, for a child. So, I know what's already going to happen, right? People who have used it and for a life, for a child, a son and daughter, are you going to look into the eyes of this precious child and say, they shouldn't be here? That's going to be, I already know. There'll be wrestling in front of the microphones to say that. Okay, that is for sure. But here's the thing. Imagine if we had something on the Sixth Commandment and said, okay, we believe that unmarried 15-year-olds shouldn't get pregnant. And then imagine using this as an argument. Can you look in the eyes of this precious child and say, this child, you see where am I getting at? Like that automatically falls apart. It doesn't work. That's not how you have to do these things. And we're saying that here with in vitro fertilization, that we are saying that these children and embryos are precious, but we are also saying that let's not needlessly create them. And also, there are other things when it comes to this where you implant, you seek to many, and then not all of them take. You assume that, those can be a lot of loss in these things. Or maybe they all take, and then what are we going to do? Aunt Sharon can't have a litter. So that's the thing. Now, I understand the desire for children. We need more families desiring children. But this addresses this. Now, I'm not sure. I haven't really looked at it enough to see if it has teeth. My guess that it doesn't. So that is that will be continued to a struggle. I would like to read more of it, but I really got to keep moving. So those are out of 100 and some, maybe some thoughts from your Dummies guide to your dummy, giving you a Dummies guide to this convention thing. So I'm going to end it here. May all your whereases be resolved.
Thank you for joining us. This podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Questions, thoughts, concerns? You can contact us on Facebook at facebook.com/Clerical Errors Podcast, on Twitter at Clerical Errors P for podcast, or email us at feedback@clericalerrors.org. Thanks for listening to Clerical Errors. See you next time.